Hi, I'm Femi OK. You're watching the stream. For several years now, China's Uyghurs have been complaining about discriminatory treatment. We first heard news of allegations about detention camps for Uyghurs back in 2018. Now, according to the United Nations, an estimated 1 million Uyghurs are detained. And when challenged about these detention camps, China described the facilities as vocational training centres. In the United Kingdom this month, an independent tribunal decided that the treatment of China's Uyghurs should be called genocide. Here is the tribunal's chair, Sir Geoffrey Nice, with more.
Evidence from witnesses, fact witnesses, heard at the tribunal's hearings in June and September, which was largely accepted by the tribunal, show that in Xinjiang, at the hands of some part or parts of the PRC government and the CCP, hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs, with some estimates well in excess of 1 million, have been detained by PRC authorities without any or any remotely sufficient reason, and subjected to acts of unconscionable cruelty, depravity, and inhumanity. Detainees were forced to provide blood samples and subjected to other medical testing for no disclosed reason. Pregnant women in detention centres and outside were forced to have abortions, even at the very last stages of pregnancy. In the course of attempted abortions, babies were sometimes born alive, but then killed.
That was one example of international action as far as the treatment of Uyghurs are concerned in the northwestern part of China. What other international action might well change the future of the Uyghur people? That is the question for today's episode of the stream. If you have a comment, you have a question for our lineup, please let us know. Put it in the comment section on YouTube. So let's meet our panel. Hello to Johar. Hello to Mamat-Jan and hello to Morata. Good to have you here on the stream. Johar, welcome back to the stream. Please remind our audience who you are, what you do.
Thank you very much for having me again, Femi. My name is Johar Ilham. I am an author, a human rights advocate. I am also the Forced Labor Project coordinator at the Worker Rights Consortium.
Good to have you. Mamat-Jan, always good to see you on the stream. Remind our audience who you are, what you do.
I'm here. Thank you very much for having me. I'm here today again. Yes, I'm Mamat-Jan Juma. I work for Radio Free Asia as a Deputy Director of Uyghur Service. We cover China-related news.
Thank you, Mamat-Jan, for joining us again on the stream. And hello, Morata. Good to have you. Please introduce yourself to our international audience.
Thank you for having me here. I am Morata Ilikut. I am a project researcher at Uyghur Transitional Justice Database. It's an ongoing project that focuses on the registration of disappeared and extrajudicially interned Uyghurs and other Turkic people.
Yes, I want to start with this UK Independent Tribunal. What difference does it make if an independent tribunal says what is happening to China's Uyghurs, that is genocide? Johar, you start.
Well, first of all, it's when I first heard the decision, the announcement of the decision by the Uyghur Tribunal, as an Uyghur individual, I didn't know whether I should cry or smile. It is deeply saddening for us to hear that genocide is happening to my people. But I also was grateful to see that such decision was made when hundreds of thousands of our Uyghur brothers and sisters are going through all types of torture and sufferings by the Chinese government. And even though the Uyghur Tribunal does not hold any enforcement power, but it is, and it should be acknowledged because of its intellectual moral credibility. And I really hope that the decision, following the tribunal's decision, it will bring up more attention and awareness on this issue. And also, it can encourage more government entities to put on an action on this matter, because it is government's jobs, their responsibility to stop genocide.
Morata, help us understand how the tribunal used the information that you were able to gather as part of your organisation. You were an expert witness. What did you bring to the tribunal?
Yes, I was invited as an expert witness to the Uyghur Tribunal due to a report which our team have released this year, and I was a co-author of this annual report. So what we were presented in regards to the testimony collection part was that we have provided a statistic. We have registered a total of 6,285 testimonies of people who are missing, detained in camps, sentenced into prison, or died in this re-education camps. We have also worked with satellite imagery research. Our team have documented the geolocations of 234 re-education camps and 257 prisons. There are some horrible findings among these statistics. We found that 147 camps have forced labor factories inside or near the detention facilities, which means that we suspect that they are involved in forced labor. And we did also find that 42 camps have crematoriums located within 10 kilometers. We have shared these findings with the independent investigators from Radio Free Asia, for example, and thereby confirmed some of the crematoriums located in Aksu City. Mm-hmm. And we did also find that there's a few camps which is located next to an atomic laboratory in Urumqi city, and we therefore suspect that these camps might have connections with forced organ harvesting. Okay. So this is what I presented at the Uyghur Tribunal.
Wow, that's really shocking material there. I want to share something with you, Mamat-Jan. This is from Global Times, which is a state China paper, publication. They describe this Uyghur tribunal as a farce that's been staged in the West. What do you make of that reaction, Mamat-Jan?
China's response to this tribunal and other international actions or campaigns always, the same. So instead of giving or providing any substantial rebuttal, criticize or personal attack the organizers. For example, they attacked human rights advocates as well as the lawyers. For example, Sir Jeffrey Nice. They accused Sir Jeffrey Nice as a spy instead of showing what parts of their findings were incorrect. So China's rebuttals like this baseless, and always they do it as an attack instead of showing any kind of counter arguments, legitimate counter arguments. It's not surprising at all.
Johan, I'm going to bring in a new voice into our conversation, and this comes from the Public Affairs Officer of East Turkestan Youth Congress. His name is Amanalas Response, and you said you didn't know whether to be happy or sad about what this tribunal found out, i.e. genocide. This is Amanalas' response. Have a listen and then react to the video.
Regarding the tribunal and other court actions against China, we encourage courts to see all atrocities happening in East Turkestan as an ongoing colonial process. The ambition of the Chinese regime is to eliminate everyone and anyone who is not Chinese enough per their definition, so they can have a firm control of the territories.
Agree with lots of things that he just mentioned, that many Uyghurs have been forced to suffer from Chinese government's regime under different types of egregious human rights abuses because of their identity. And it's really saddening to see that it has been happening and it's still continuing. And governments around the world need to put on action immediately to stop this from keep happening.
I would like to address one more point, if I can have the chance. I would like to just address that about the harassment which the witnesses have been facing during the hearings. I remember the 3 Kazakh witnesses who arrived from Kazakhstan. Prior to the hearing starts, they've been receiving phone calls from Kazakhstan's state security services, threatening them not to testify. Besides, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs held a set of press conferences using the family members of the witnesses who were given evidence to undermine the testimonies. And one of the fact witnesses actually had a video of her husband on the official foreign ministry's Twitter page. Her husband described her story as nonsense. And even after the hearings, the Chinese authorities have called the family members of all Uyghur and Kazakh witnesses, and they held a press conference forcing them to denounce that their family members are liars. And even Church House, the conference center, was put under pressure not to hold this event. So we can see that the brutality of this government, they knows no bounds, and they will do everything in order to support their narrative, denying that there's any problem. And they really tried their best to make it to look like it's all made up. And I think the methods that they've been using are extremely despicable to be a state.
Yes, it is despicable and immoral. They also attacked some Uyghur survivors, such as Torsnaz Yavadon and Zumrat Dawud, that they have been speaking up about their treatment in the camps, for example, how they were treated and how the Uyghur camp inmates were tortured, raped, the systematic rape, electric shocks and torture. And instead of countering them with evidence, China attacked them morally. They attacked their personal character, described them liars and immoral people. So that's how they attack, actually. This happened.
Yes, what I feel is different about the conversation that we're having now, not the horrific allegations and the experiences of Uyghurs who've been caught up in China's program of either forced labor or these detention camps, is that the knowledge is out there. Before we were trying to get this knowledge out there, we're not doing here's where Northwest China is, here are where the detention camps are. We're already talking about this as if our audience knows all about it. Let's talk about some other international pressure that is not about this independent tribunal. For instance, the upcoming Beijing Olympics. There's been a lot of activity about that, and should it be boycotted? Should there be diplomatic boycotts? I'm going to ask you to take off your filter, Johar. Honestly, a diplomatic boycott, what does that even mean? How helpful is that?
Well, diplomatic boycott means that the country that announced the diplomatic boycott will not send any officials to attend the game.
I didn't literally mean, what does that mean? But what does it mean to Uyghurs?
Yes. It's great to hear. It's very heartwarming to see that there are so far around 7 countries that have announced diplomatic boycotts. Today, Belgium just also joined the list of boycotting the Olympics, boycotting the Olympics diplomatically. But we want to see concrete measures, and we want to see that this boycott can also send a message to athletes around the world as well. Do they want to compete in countries that are committing a genocide towards a group of people? And also, I also hope that this diplomatic boycott can send a message to corporations around the world. Do they want to sponsor a game that are supporting the genocide?
And there are some human rights activists and human rights organizations. They are calling a full-blown boycott because they think that diplomatic boycott doesn't have any tooth. So it's symbolic, but it is still better than nothing, but should be done as well as also economically, as well as full-blown boycott might impact China's decisions against.
Can I share this thought with you? This comes from René Provost. He's a professor of law at McGill University. He sent this to us a little bit earlier to add to our conversation about the impact of even a diplomatic boycott of the upcoming Winter Olympics. Here he is.
So generally speaking, the best approach is to mainstream human rights, to make it a part of every relation that a government has with China. So economic relations, boycotting some goods produced by Uyghurs, absolutely. But also the diplomatic boycotts of the Olympics, I think, is a very interesting and effective approach. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, says that they would not join because it was merely symbolic. And that, in fact, is exactly the point. The Olympics are symbolic. They are part of China's claim to be a central power in the world. So a diplomatic boycott symbolically challenges that claim.
Yes, I agree. Because United States government announced China is committing genocide, and at the same time, if they send anybody diplomatic representation to China, so that would be supporting or legitimizing their actions against Uyghurs, and also negating their decisions before they made in January. So it's a good decision, and many countries, at least 7 countries, followed yes. But according to the human rights activists and organizations and some other governments, for example, they're also contemplating full-blown boycott, and we want to see that as well. For example, this writer, David Clapp, he wrote that because of the international community failed the 1936 Berlin Olympics, that emboldened Hitler, and at the end, 60 million innocent Jews lost their lives.
Wow.
So had it been stopped or pressured the German government and turned their course, this Holocaust wouldn't have happened. So this author argues that there's a lot of parallels. So at the time, many Western countries had a lot of economic interests in Germany, so they didn't issue any full-blown boycott at the time. So they are having the same interest right now. So maybe that's why they're not really boycotting the Olympic fully. That's his argument. So this kind of argument has been there since this year. You can see a lot of places.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, first of all, China shouldn't be hosting this game. The Olympics are an expression of freedom, fair competition, and respect. And I think China's behavior does not represent any of these qualities, and instead they're carrying out a genocide. And we are actually allowing the world's highest profile event to be used to sport wash a genocide regime's reputation. I think the International Olympic Committee should be blamed for this situation, actually, because they decided to allocate the Winter Games in Beijing, even though they knew that there's serious crimes are being committed by the Chinese regime. And instead of standing up for their own principles, the International Olympic Committee have chosen to keep their golden money on track. And I think in terms of the effect of the diplomatic boycott, it will be more efficient if more and more countries participate in this diplomatic boycott campaign.
Okay.
And several countries did already.
All right, I have so many YouTube questions for you, guests. Are you ready? All right, and we're going to do these very fast so we can get as many in as possible. I'm going to start with a YouTube comment, go straight to a lawmaker in the US called Marco Rubio, and then come back to you, guests. So stand by for this. Cuba, who's watching online now, thank you. The only thing I'm wondering is whether or not using economic pressure is actually useful. Sanctions are used all the time, yet besides doing economic damage, they never seem to get much else done. Okay, that's one view from YouTube. Here is Marco Rubio with what he is hoping to do legally in the United States regarding forced labor. Have a listen, have a look.
After months of working on this and negotiation and having to play a little hardball, my Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act is going to become law. It's a common sense bill that says if you make things in Xinjiang, then you need to prove that there is no slave labor involved in making it before you can bring that stuff into the United States. In other words, the proof is now on the businesses, not the burden's on them to show that they are not operating using these work camps. And if you can't prove it, then your product doesn't enter the United States. It's that simple. So I hope and urge President Biden to sign the bill into law immediately. It's time to end our economic addiction to China, and that starts by cracking down on slave labor.
Johar, go ahead.
Yesterday, the House and Senate finally made an agreement on the language of this bill, and I can't wait for it to be passed completely. And that's only the first step. The most vital step is the enforcement. Without enforcement, then it's nothing.
Just talk.
Yes, and if the bill can actually be passed by December 31st, end of this year, that means by next summer, there will be no products made by the Uyghur region, by the Uyghur people, will be allowed entering the U.S. as long as except they can prove it that it's with clear evidence that it's not made by Uyghur forced labor. And I can't wait for that to happen.
All right, so many more questions on YouTube. All right, Moata, this one's coming to you. Fuad says, I think the world has already failed the Uyghurs. They haven't been able to stop the CCP. Your thoughts briefly?
Yes, I think Uyghur activists around the world have been doing so much to stop this genocide, these atrocities. And the launch of the tribunal, diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics and the Forced Labor Prevention Act, and so much more. And however, we do not see that the camps are closed. It's still there. And there are still people reporting about their missing family members. And there are recent reports on people being killed during interrogation in these camps. And international brands are still benefiting from Uyghur forced labor. So this means that we have a lot more to do. And the Forced Labor Prevention Act and the verdict of the Uyghur Tribunal, it gives us hope. It means that we're not alone in this fight.
I'm going to bring in this thought here. This one is for you, Mamat-Jan. It comes from Neat Feet, who is very sympathetic towards the Chinese authorities. China is treated unfairly. Xinjiang protects the freedom of travel of people of all ethnic groups, including the Uyghurs, and their communication with overseas relatives according to the law. I know that guests here, I know that is not true as far as your relatives are concerned, but have a listen here to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, who is pushing back on the sanctions that were just applied by the US. And then, Mamat-Jan, pick up off the back. Here we go.
We are telling the United States that the Chinese government is unwavering in its determination to defend national sovereignty, security, and development interests. We are unwavering in our determination to combat violence, terrorism, separatism, and religious extremist forces. We are unwavering in our determination to oppose any external interference in Xinjiang's affairs or China's internal affairs. The perverse actions of the United States cannot destroy the overall shape of Xinjiang's development, stop China's progress, or reverse the trend of historical development. We urge the U.S. to immediately withdraw the relevant wrong decision and stop interfering in China's internal affairs and harming China's interests. If the U.S. acts recklessly, China will take effective measures to strike back resolutely.
Mamat-Jan, it doesn't sound like China is acknowledging any of the external pressure that is being applied regarding the treatment of the Uyghurs. In a sentence, we're at the end of the show. How would you respond?
China has been denying. For example, when we covered, they detained many Uyghurs, at least 120,000 Uyghurs in Kashgar. And before that, they denied they had this internment camps, they call it. At the end, after the international pressure and international news media reports, they admitted they had this camps, and they called it vocational schools or training centers, job training centers. And at the end, right now, we have found out that there are indeed concentration camps.
Yeah.
So it might take some time for China to really admit what they're doing in Uyghur region is wrong, and they're committing genocide, and they should admit that.
All right. I'm going to leave you with one more voice, because that question I asked, what is the point? Does China respond? Is answered by this final voice in our conversation. Have a listen, have a look.
We know for a fact that international pressure really works. This is the only way that will stop China from continuing to commit genocide against the Uyghur people. This pressure may not immediately change the conditions on the ground, but it is putting China on defensive. First, they denied everything. Next, they changed the subject. And now, they have been forced to defend their atrocities to the government, the UN, and in front of the whole world. we need to continue pressure from all sides. It is the only way to bring genocide to an end.
Thank you, guests, for helping us understand the situation with the Uyghurs in China right now and the internal and external pressure that is being applied. Johar, Mamatjan and Muatar, I appreciate you being part of the stream today. And on YouTube, your questions were very helpful. Thank you for having that conversation with us here on the stream. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.